Yes. And it says we're back. And we're live. My computer's making this weird noise. That's not good. Anyway, there are still people logging on. I'm going to give them a moment to kind of get on there because it looks like there's only 2 people on there so far. Make sure they'll vote. This can't be good. It says that I'm live, yet on my phone, the thing doesn't seem to be loading. Let's try this again. Nope, there I am. Yeah, I'm live. So that should work out good. Okay. Goodness gracious. I cannot believe we are already almost halfway through April. You are 75% done with your school year. We have a month and a couple weeks until the AP test. So we have plenty of time until that AP test. Because we're going for the second testing session window, that does buy an extra couple of weeks, but we'll figure that out as time goes on. Next, when we left for break, that was the end of the 3rd marking period. But teachers have to submit grades by the 15th. I believe I left a message on your Google Classroom stream. There it is, where I said, attention, teachers are required to submit grades before April 15th, and we're currently on spring break. This translates to you having some extra time to get some things turned in. Now, I can't promise that for all teachers. I'm saying that for me, mainly because I still have some things to get done. I still have some things to grade, outstanding things that I've left in a bag. Why would I leave them in a bag? I have everything on the computer. I left in my computer pretty much over the course of break. I tried not to do as anything as possible over break. I don't even know. But we'll figure this thing out. As always, in the chat, if you would be so kind to leave a comment so I can take an appropriate attendance, and then I can fill you in on what we are going to be doing today. Today is twofold. Number one, I want to revisit t-testing and various examples that I have for you out of the textbook that I have pre-marked that I would like to do with you. But then, at the very end, not the very end, but one of the last problems, I want to take another step deeper into the t-testing world, which you'll see. I want to do a matched pairs t-test, but we'll get there when we get there. Now, what I'm going to do, and I say this for you guys here and for you guys listening online, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be displaying directly out of the textbook certain problems. Now, for those of you that are in class, obviously, and online, it can be somewhat difficult to read this as is. Also, there are going to be certain problems where I'm going to ask you to also follow along on the calculator so that you get the practice with typing these things in and actually getting the data as you need. So I'm going to strongly suggest that you have the Chromebooks open. If you can get the online textbook open, that would be also fantastic. I'll tell you exactly what page we're on, just so you don't have to squint and strain at a screen trying to figure out what the problem is actually saying. Also, you would have the calculators open on your Chromebooks as well, so that you could follow along and do these calculations so you get the practice with them. That would be fantastic. Let's see. Just double checking online. There are all those wonderful people online. Awesome. Cool. So just for the sake of argument, when you get to the e-text of the online textbook, I'm on page 660. That is the page that I'll be starting on. I'm going to be sticking to this main section, like 660, 61, 662, stuff like that. I'm going to be sticking to that section, really. It's the t-testing review section. No, I am not assigning an assessment just yet. I'm not doing that today. But I would like to go over the parts that I need to go over. And then, of course, I'll be flipping back over here as well to my Elmo camera so that I can write down what I need to write down so that I have that information. In fact, that would be a great place to start. So if you would, you already have your Chromebooks open, that's fantastic. But if you would, I'm also need those notebooks out and open. A little wave there, that was fun. I really missed my calling to host a TV show. Although I don't know what it would be about. Probably dogs. Today is the 13th. Now, I'm going to be giving you multiple titles at various points, but the general title of today is a t-testing recap and matched pairs. This is the general title for today, although I am going to be giving you various titles along the way as well. T-testing recap and matched pairs. Oh, there he is. Someone get it. He made it. Whoa! You missed my speech. Everyone was so excited. They clapped. No, too late. Too late. You're not a part of that. Anyway, back to this. What I would suggest for everyone, what they already did, having the Chromebooks out so that you can reference the online textbook if need be, and the calculator, of course, but also the notebooks. I'm going to be jumping back and forth between the three. I got them all. It's great. It's fantastic. The problem that I would like to start with is number 22. Number 22 on page 660. So that's the reference if need be. I'm jumping to that one right there. Will it let me zoom? It lets me zoom in a little bit. But of course, like I said, I strongly suggest that you do have the online textbooks so that you don't have to strain at the screen. But here we go. Number 22. A college student is on a meal program. His budget allows him to spend an average of $10 per day for the semester. He keeps track of his daily food expenses for 2 weeks. The data are given in the table. Is there strong evidence that he will overspend his food allowance? And then it says to explain. It doesn't say how to do it. It doesn't say what to use. It just basically says, is there strong evidence that he will overspend his food allowance? There's a number of different directions that you can go when reading a problem like this. Technically, two main directions that you could go in. You could either perform a hypothesis test, or you can construct a confidence interval. Either one would technically be acceptable for this problem because they do not specify which one to use. But keep in mind that if you do perform the confidence interval, you are still going to be performing a lot of the things that you do in the hypothesis test. You would still have to walk yourself through assumptions and conditions. You would still have to perform some kind of a calculation with the aid of the calculator, of course, which I'm going to walk you through. And you would have to come to a suitable conclusion. So technically, you can't go wrong with either one, but you would still have to go through a lot of similar steps. Now, for this particular problem, I'm just going to start without even writing anything down. I'm going to start by going to my calculator. And I'm going to type into list one. And again, I strongly suggest that you follow along, do the same thing, because you need to get the practice with doing that. But I'm just going to type in the costs for the 14 consecutive days that he recorded, including the zeros. Make sure you put the zeros in. But I'm going to type those numbers into my calculator. Let's see what I got here. I got this thing open here as well, so I can flip this over. There we go. Oh, that's weird. Fix that screen. A little better. Cool. Stat. Edit. And I'm going to be typing in the following numbers. Where's number 22? There it is. 15.2. Come on. 0.2. 23.2. 3.2. 9.8. 19.53. 6.52. Or 25. 0. 8.55. 20.05. 14.95. 23.45. 75. 0. 9.91. I'm just going to double check real quick to make sure that all of those numbers were typed in correctly. Because obviously if one of them is off, it could really throw off my results. There we go. Again, this is problem number 22 on page 660. When it comes to running any type of hypothesis test or confidence interval, doesn't matter. What would be helpful is getting some summary statistics from this data. I am going to be, in a moment, running a 1-var stat. But before I do that, let me jump back to the wording of the question, just to confirm something for myself. Oops, sorry. The only piece or pieces of information or data that they give me are the 14 days, which I can get an average of, and I can get a standard deviation of. There's no population mean, there's no population standard deviation. It means that since there's no population standard deviation, that if I were to run a hypothesis test, this would be a t-test. And if I were to run a confidence interval, it would be a t-interval. T because, well, again, no population standard deviation. Okay, guess I will need that sample mean and that sample standard deviation. Stat, calc, 1-var stat. Everything is set up already to do a 1-var stat on L1. Haha, okay. I'm going to write down a few pieces of information here. X bar is equal to 11.424, I guess. I don't know. I don't have to go 3 decimals. I just feel like it. And S is equal to 8.058. That makes sense. The 9, and then it rounds up. Okay. So far, I got those 2 pieces of information right there. During those 14 days, he spent an average of $11.42 with a standard deviation of $8.06, I guess, if you round it up. But I'm going to keep the decimals as is. Go back over here. His budget allows him to spend an average of $10 per day for the semester. Is there strong evidence that he will overspend his food allowance? Now, at this point, clearly, on average, he is overspending his food allowance. But we need to allow for the fact that we can run a hypothesis test or a confidence interval in order to make an appropriate conclusion. Either one would be acceptable. Now, I ran into a little bit of an issue with the textbook. The textbook, when they were explaining this problem to me, they didn't go through any assumptions or conditions, and I was a little bit peeved by that. I'm like, how come you didn't go through any assumptions and conditions? Oh, I guess one could say, I mean, this is 14 consecutive days, but they just, I don't know, I guess you could say they're random, but the real point of them being random is so that each day could be independent from the next. I don't know, this is weird. It's like, do you think that the food that you eat one day affects the food that you eat the next day? Yeah, I think it could. I absolutely think it could. I mean, some might argue, well, no, if I eat a burger one day, I might eat a taco the next day. But you probably won't eat burgers 2 days in a row. And if you look at his money situation here, It's like maybe he felt like he overspent, and then the next couple of days he underspent to kind of make up for it. I don't know. They don't really give me that information. I'm talking about a real person here. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. You ever get food from Olive Garden and they give you like a giant thing and you only eat like a quarter of it? Yeah. And then you have like Olive Garden the next 2 days. I don't know. Not that that's a real life example. Shut up. Anyway, but it's just, look, 3 days in a row he overspent. I'm like, okay, then the next 3 days he underspent. It's a little difficult to go through the assumptions and conditions for this problem. It is. And it would be helpful if this were an AP test question for you to speak to those assumptions and conditions, not just to blindly write the word independence or random, but to actually explain it in context. It is very important that you do so. Very important that you do so. So I'm just going to write a couple of sentences here. Let's see. Flip to, oh, there it is. Flip to that one. Cool. I'm going to run a hypothesis test. And my hypothesis test, well, I'm going to have to do the assumptions and conditions in a moment. But my hypothesis is going to be something like this. The question is, if I could reword this or reread this question, is there evidence that he will overspend his allowance? The null hypothesis is that, nope, nothing going on. It's fine, $10 on average, nailed it. But then the alternate hypothesis is that he overspent. So thus it's greater than $10. And obviously the evidence that we have so far, the evidence that we have right here is that, well, X bar is definitely greater than 10. But again, I got to get a p-value and then come to an appropriate conclusion. Let's talk about assumptions, conditions. Now this is tricky. Now, it says he's a college student and he's only going to be there for the semester. Semesters usually run like the middle of, or end of August to like the middle of December or something like that. It's like September, October, November, December. It's like 4 months. And if you go 4 months, it's like 30 days per month. It's like 120 days, give or take. I guess you could then say, oh, hi. Is that for me? I thought it was from me.
Oh, sorry.
All right. Gosh, no one gives me things anymore. Anyway, so he did 14 days. 14 days, less than 10% of semester days? Question mark? I put a question mark there because it's like, I don't know. I think it could be over 10%. I have a lot of problems with this problem. I think it could be over 10%. I mean, and you could explain that. Again, I am going to go forth with the t-test, but I am going to go with a lot of caution here. Days are not necessarily random. Because again, he picked 14 consecutive days. I don't know. Now, it said his budget allowed him to spend an average of $10 per day. He kept track of his daily food expenses. Did he keep track of it because he was trying to spend under $10? I don't know. They're not necessarily random. Independence of days, or I'm sorry, independence of money spent, not guaranteed. It's not guaranteed, unfortunately. This marker is going away on me. I'm going to throw it across the room. It made it. No one believes me. Okay. Independence of money spent, not guaranteed. Yeah, this test is really falling apart on us so far. Now, hold on. 10% rule, randomness, independence. What am I missing for a t-test? I don't need a large enough sample size for a t-test. Do you remember? Well, nearly normal. Has to look nearly the data. And I can check this data. I can check this data. The nearly normal condition, maybe we'll hit the nearly normal condition. Hold on. I'll go back to my calculator. And again, this is good practice for you if you don't remember how to do this per se, but second y equals. Turn that plot on. I need to look at a histogram. List one. Everything's good there so far. It's on a histogram, list one. I'm going to zoom 9 it. This problem, man. I'm going to copy down that histogram. I am going to copy down that histogram. It's like, I can't say it's symmetric. I can't even really say it's skewed to the right per se. I mean, I could argue that it's skewed to the right. You know? Could argue that. But it's difficult to say that this is nearly normal. But again, these are the things that you would go through when performing the hypothesis test. You would have to go through it with an abundance of caution. And ultimately, in your conclusion, speak to that caution. Speak to that caution. There we go. So that's what I drew. This would be like money spent. And this would be frequency. Assumptions, conditions, not really met for t-testing. Not really met for t-testing. Will proceed with caution. Will proceed with caution. It would be in your best interest to make those kind of statements. I've seen what you guys have done on your assumptions and conditions, and a lot of you have just kind of blindly accepted assumptions and conditions. And you know, for the most part, like a lot of these problems have been fine with it. But this one, there's a lot of problems with the assumptions and conditions. It's not reasonable that it's less than 10% of the semester days. The days aren't really random. He just picked like 14 consecutive days. As a result, the independence can't be assumed because what you eat one day might affect what you eat the next day. Maybe he went to Taco Bell one day, got sick, and decided not to eat the next day. I don't know. That's the importance of needing randomness. But, let's just proceed with caution and see what happens. So we are going to perform a t-test. So let me go back to my calculator actually real quick. Stat, tests, t-tests. Instead of doing data, I'm going to input it as stats, just for the fun of it. If you had run the 1var stat, your x bar and your s should already be there. And yes, n is equal to 14 because of the 14 days. What was my mu null? What do I put in for this there? Yeah. And which one do I pick down here? I can't. Yeah. Sure. Everything looks good so far. He doesn't want to overspend $10, but we think he might be. The evidence shows that he is overspending during those 14 days. We're looking at being greater than mu sub 0. Okay, let's calculate. Ooh, very interesting. Very interesting. So let's see. I'm going to write down some information and then I'll flip my screen over. So x bar was that number, s was that number, N was that number. Mu sub 0 is equal to 10. And we were looking at the alternate being greater than mu sub 0. Let me actually just double check. What did that thing said in there? Yeah. We're looking at that being great. Okay, good. Second mode. It went away. Run the t-test again. Calculate. There we go. Good. And after we performed the t-test, I got a t-score of 0.661 and a p-value of 0.26. So let me flip my screen over so you can see exactly what I just wrote down. This is what I wrote down. I put in all of that information into the t-test, and out came that t-score and that p-value. Now, how that t-score and p-value were calculated for this problem, I am going to show you how that t-score and that p-value were actually calculated. I'm going to show you that on this problem, not on future problems. But for the AP test, if you were doing an open-ended question, this would be sufficient for performing the test. You tell the AP grader what test you performed, what data you inputted, and what results you got out of it. And then you can go straight to your conclusion, which I'm going to in a little bit. But I am going to show you how I calculated this junk, because it's pretty awesome. Now, just for the sake of argument, do I reject or do I fail to reject with this p-value? Y'all don't remember my inappropriate rhyme? Oh, he's nodding yes. Okay. So what are we doing here? We reject if the p is low. If the p is low, fill in the blank. So what do we do here? Implying, is he overspending? You're shaking your head no. I agree. We fail to reject because the p-value is too high. But what are we failing to reject? We are failing to reject this null hypothesis, meaning we don't have enough evidence to reject it. We don't have enough evidence to show that he is spending more than $10. We are failing to reject this, meaning evidence shows that he's not overspending $10. And we will come to that conclusion in a few moments. We will. I just want to show you how these particular things were calculated. So in my little paper right here, I'm going to write down, come here, you. There we go. I'm going to write down this. For the t-score, it's the same thing that we've always calculated in the past, and I'll show you this on the calculator as well, where you would take x bar minus mu divided by s over the square root of n. Now, typically in the past, you would do the data point minus the average divided by the standard deviation. That's how we would get z-scores. But since this is a sample, the standard deviation has to be divided by the square root of n, making it a standard error. But we don't have the population standard deviation, so we have to use the sample standard deviation. And it is still technically the data point minus the average because the data point was the sample mean. If I did this in the calculator, actually, I would be typing in the following numbers, and I'll show you how I did it. There we go. So those would be the numbers that would be typed in, the sample average minus the accepted population average, or not the accepted, I shouldn't say accepted, the assumed population average, divided by the sample standard deviation over the square root of 14. I would type it in like this. Like parentheses 11.424 minus 10, close those. I said close those parentheses, not hit enter. Close those parentheses, divided by parentheses 8.058 divided by the square root of 14. Make sure I close that appropriately. Oh, hello. There's my t-score. Everyone's coming to my room today. Hello.
Sorry to bother you. May I see Priscilla and Anthony?
Okay. Cool. So you can see right here, this decimal is exactly the t-score that we got, the 0.661 approximately, but that is how that t-score was calculated. Now, for the p-value, because we are doing the p-value with a t-test, you would have to use a t-CDF. You would have to use a t-CDF in order to get the p-value. Before, we would use normal CDF, but for here, you would have to use t-CDF. I want you to notice something once I get to the calculator. If I go second vars t-CDF, notice that they only allow me to type in 3 numbers. A lower value, an upper value, and the most American stat of all time, degrees of freedom. In this case, if I flip back over here, I am going to be typing in the following things. Because the alternate hypothesis was trying to determine, okay, well, is he overspending $10? Is it greater than $10? That means that I would technically be trying to go from above $10 or the data point or greater. In this case, it would be the t-score or greater. Unfortunately, those are the only numbers that I can type in. And notice I put in a 13 here because that is the degrees of freedom, n minus 1. If I type that here, 0.661, comma, some big number, comma, 13, boom, 0.26. I'm just showing you the mechanics. These are the mechanics behind these calculations. How they got the t-score, how they got the p-value. Conclusion. With a p-value so large, 0.26 greater than 0.05, where I'm using 0.05 arbitrarily as my alpha value, we fail to reject the null. There isn't enough evidence. There is not enough evidence to suggest he is, and I want to get the right wording here based on the question, is there strong evidence that he will overspend his food allowance? There is not enough evidence to suggest he is overspending his food allowance. Always, always, always put your conclusion in the context of the problem. I wanted to word it exactly like they worded it in the actual prompt, in the actual question. But now here's the big key thing from before. However, because the assumptions, conditions were not, I would say, closely enough met, because, we could like barely meet the assumptions and conditions. We could just meet the assumptions and conditions, but these were like way too far. Because the assumptions and conditions were not closely enough met, these results should be treated with caution. You're leaving yourself an out. You're leaving yourself wiggle room in case you are completely wrong. Because then if somebody comes to you in real life and they're like, hey, you told me I wasn't overspending my budget. I said, hey, did you actually read my full conclusion? Because I gave myself an out at the end. Your assumptions and conditions were not met. So the data that you gave me may not have been acceptable enough to perform the t-test, but I went ahead and performed it anyway because you threatened me. I'm assuming that's what happened. I don't know how college works. Not that I've ever been there. But yeah, this would be an appropriate conclusion for this problem. I want to show you one more thing with this problem. I actually want to perform the t interval, but I'm not going to write anything down. Check this out. I want to perform the t interval. Stat, tests, t interval. Let's see. X bar, S, 14, 95% confidence. Okay, this could work. Let's see what we get here. Oh, there's the t interval. I would say that I would reach the exact same conclusion. I would say that because of this t interval, I do not have enough evidence to show that he's overspending his food allowance. Why? I would come to the exact same conclusion. Why? The interval goes from 677 up to 1608. Why am I failing to reject again? Why am I concluding that he doesn't have enough evidence? Yeah, it includes numbers that are less than $10. I am 95% confident that the true dollar value of his spending habits on food is within this interval. And because part of this interval is less than $10, I come to the same conclusion. But again, with the same amount of caution. With the same amount of caution because of those assumptions and conditions. That's what we can come to. This thing. I love it so much. Okay. Let's jump. Oh, I love that problem. Okay. I love this problem. Let's go to number 38. Number 38. Same kind of pages in the book. I believe it's going to be page 663. Yeah, 663. Excellent. Here's what I want you to do. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to try this one on your own for a few minutes. Now, this is a quote-unquote short-ish problem. I say short-ish because depending on how you treat it, it could be an incredibly short problem, but we'll see. As a project for an introductory stat course, students checked 6 bags of Fritos marked with a net weight of 35.4 grams, meaning on the bag itself, they have that little net weight in the bottom corner printed, and they say, well, it should contain 35.4 grams. They carefully weighed the contents of each bag, recording the following weights in grams. Is there evidence that the mean weight of bags of Fritos is less than advertised. Now, they say to actually do the hypothesis test. They say write an appropriate hypothesis, check the assumptions and conditions, test your hypothesis using all 6 weights, but then, retest your hypothesis with the one unusually high weight removed. And then they say, what would you conclude about the stated weight? I want to see what you can do here. Take the next less than 5 minutes or so. See what you can do with this problem. Now, what's really interesting about this problem is the conclusion that we could reach slash what the book reaches. Because this problem, I disagree with the rationale of the book, but we'll get there in a moment. So for this problem, they want you to write an appropriate hypotheses. They're trying to determine whether or not is there evidence that the mean weight of bags at Fritos is less than advertised. So this is number 38. And I already lost what page, 663. On page 663. So if I was going to come to hypothesis, I would say that the null hypothesis is that the weight of the bags of Fritos, or the, I'm trying to get the page again. Where'd that page go? 35.4. That is the advertised claim. That is the claimed weight of the bags of Fritos. And is there evidence that the mean weight of bags is less than advertised, meaning the alternate hypothesis would be less than 35.4? That would be an appropriate hypothesis there. Assumptions and conditions. You should have a slightly easier time with these assumptions and conditions. If I go back to the wording of the question, it says students checked 6 bags of Fritos marked with a net weight of 35.4. It does not say that the bags were randomly selected. But it could be reasonable that the 6 bags, even though they don't say how they got them, they don't say like that everybody brought in a bag of Fritos. But if you go to the supermarket and you pick up a couple of bags of Fritos, the 2 bags sitting next to each other, I mean, it's reasonable to say, not necessarily that they're random, but it's reasonable to say that the weights of the 2 bags are independent of each other. You have automated machines that are filling these bags and then packing them, and then they travel across the country, and then eventually they're unpacked, and then they're put on the shelves, and it's kind of iffy, but you could say independence of bag weights reasonable. You could say independence of bag weights reasonable. Again, give that some context. I am going to state this. Randomness not stated. Unsure of selection. Again, just being completely honest with the problem. The problem never stated that it was random, and we're unsure as to how these bags were actually selected. Was it 6 kids independently going to the supermarket and each getting their own bag of Fritos on their own time? Was it the teacher who bought them all at once and just brought them in? I don't know. So we're really unsure of the selection of randomness, but let's just see what happens. Now this I'm fairly confident of. 6 bags is less than 10% of Frito bag population. I'm fairly confident on that. I'm pretty sure there are more than 60 bags of Fritos in the world. Anyway, we also have to talk about nearly normal. Well, I got to go to my calculator. Got to go to my calculator for nearly normal. Edit. Let me clear those out. Boom, they go away. And let's see. I got to put in 35.5. 35.3, 35.1, 35.1, 36.4, 35.4, and 35.5. There we go. Let's check nearly normal. Plot on. Histogram, it's already set. Zoom 9. Why is this? Why? How do you know it's an outlier? Ah, now you're getting in the right direction. Yes. The rule, which I'll write on the board, the rule for determining whether or not it is an outlier, if it is outside of the range of Q1 minus 1.5 IQR, comma, Q3 plus 1.5 IQR. That's why it's an outlier. I was waiting for you to say, well, just look at it, which that's not good enough. You can't just say, just look at it. It's an outlier. I mean, seriously, just look at it. But no, if you want to prove that it's an outlier, it has to be outside this range. It is. It is. Trust me, I checked. So this is where I disagree with the book. The book is like, well, technically it's not an outlier. I'm like, what do you mean it's not an outlier? I checked it. Anyway. So now notice what the question says. Come on, question. It says to check the assumptions for inference, but then it says to test the hypothesis. It doesn't say like, hey, you're going to hit all the assumptions, because clearly the nearly normal assumption is not being met. It's not being met. They do want you to retest the hypothesis by removing that one data point and then doing it again. So I'm going to draw this little thing right here. And I'm going to say nearly normal condition not met. It's not met. Clearly, it's not met. Clearly, this thing is skewed to the right. Weight of bag. There we go. Fritos. Wait, remind me. Are Fritos like the corn chip things? Oh, they're dumb. Corn chips. Anyway, back to this. So it does want me to run the hypothesis, so I am going to do that. So let's see. T-test with the following pieces of information. I'm going to need to run a 1var stat. 1var stat with all of that information there. Now, what's nice about the 1var stat is that when you run the 1var stat in the calculator, all of that data is automatically transferred over to the t-test. Stat, tests, boom. There's all the data that I need. I just need to change the null hypothesis right here to 35.4. So that's actually what I'm going to write down. Mu sub 0 is 35.4. X bar was 35.53. Oh, snap, which is actually greater. That's actually greater than the null. Interesting. Standard deviation is 0.45. N is equal to 6. I'm going to put the alternate at being less than, because that's what my alternate hypothesis was. Let's calculate it and see what happens. Ho-ho! A p-value of 0.75. Holy crap. 0.75. Ugh. Now, 0.75, man. Yeah, I would definitely fail to reject. I don't have any evidence. I mean, I have, well, no, I shouldn't say any. But I have extremely weak evidence, especially considering the fact that the sample mean was greater than the null hypothesis. Clearly, I got a p-value that large. Now I'm going to speed up a little bit because of the time. Test the hypothesis using all 6 weights. Yeah, I would fail to reject that thing. But retest your hypothesis with that one weight removed. Now, again, on the calculator, make sure you know how to do this. On the calculator, I would go back into my list. I would go to the presumed outlier, which you can prove it's an outlier using what I wrote on the board. You can delete it. And once it's gone, you're going to want to rerun the 1var stat to get the brand new sample average of 35.36, standard deviation of 0.167, which as long as you run that 1var stat, it'll automatically be put into the t-test. Let's just take a look at the scatter plot real quick. Oh, hey. Again, everyone's coming to my room today. Now, it's not perfectly normal, but it does look a bit more uniform. Yes?
Some Rumble shirts. You want to distribute them to these students, whatever. Only 3 of them.
Gosh. Anyway, hold on. Raphael, Maya, and Haley. Get them. Okay, or not get them. You can get them. Come on, get them. Yep. Ah. Yeah. Yeah. Nailed it.
In my head.
Anyway, so this doesn't look perfectly normal, but at least it's a bit more uniform. It's not really symmetric, but again, we only have 5 data points. I mean, technically, it's like as symmetric as it can get, or uniform as it can get. Let's run the test and see what happens. I run this test. Again, my new average, my new standard deviation, my new sample size, they're all there. Let's calculate it. We took out the outlier. Holy crap. A p-value of 0.31. We would reach the same conclusion. We don't have enough evidence to show that the weight is less than advertised. We don't. We just simply don't. Now, like I said, the book does talk about it like not being an outlier, which I disagree with. The question says, what would you conclude about the stated weight? I would say something along the lines of, well, even though that weight was an outlier by this definition, it did not affect our conclusion as to whether or not the bags were weighing less than advertised. We simply don't have enough evidence to show that. In fact, the evidence points to the bags being, filled as advertised. Craziness. Now, I was not able to get to the one matched pairs question that I wanted to get to. I'm going to put, and I'm going to be very clear with my wording, I'm going to put a non-graded assignment on Google Classroom for you to read through that question, to calculate some sample data information for me. I'm going to have instructions as to how you're going to go about doing that. Perhaps some visual aids. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. But again, it would be a non-graded thing for you to be able to go through that matched pairs example that I have set up for you that I was not able to finish today. But anyway, we'll pick up with more of this on Thursday. Goodness gracious. As the bell is going to ring. There it is. If you haven't left a comment in the chat, please make sure that you do so. I do see the ones that I've seen so far. There they are right there. I'll give you another moment. Thank you, you too. Bye, guys. See you. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Oh, it's falling. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, I'm going to sign off. You too. See you.